It's always fun to be the last panel. You get a beer after 20 minutes of talking. So I will pick up on what was said before. There's been a lot of talk about internet, e-commerce, marketplaces, and lunch ordering companies and so forth. What else are Bangalore's entrepreneurs doing to solve India's problems? What are the new types of products and services that you guys are working on? Who wants to go first?
I already had an introduction, but we are working on electric vehicles, smart electric vehicles. So we started 2 years back. We actually had a Chennai startup who have recently changed loyalties and shifted to Bangalore. We're working on a lot of technologies and not just internet-based. We're working on lithium-ion battery packs, cells, battery management systems, rapid chargers, lightweighting materials, a lot of stuff. So, and as a first product, we are building a vehicle which does all that your petrol vehicle does, and it's still pure electric. So our target is pretty simple. When we started Ather, the reason was we wanted to have a significant impact from the business that we are starting. It should be able to scale significantly, and that's why we are not looking at a very niche vehicle. So that's why all the focus on technology product development is towards building a product which can legitimately replace petrol vehicles of today. So that's what we are working on. I would say that's a pretty fast evolving field right now. In India, we don't have a lot of startups working on electric vehicles, yes, but especially on the product and technology side. But just like any other field, US and Europe have taken a lead. We have at least 6, 7 very, very interesting startups in US, obviously Tesla being the most famous of them all, but there are a lot of other ones and actually well-funded ones in US, Korea, Japan. So that's, we are doing a bit in India. That's what we're doing here.
Some interesting stuff, being done in clean tech space. So I think some of the areas which the Indian entrepreneurs have really been doing off late is, apart from the food tech, which is I think the latest craze out there. At least in my office, we get daily, at least from 10 different vendors, food getting delivered. So I think logistics is something which, the entrepreneurs are really focused on off late. And it's not just about food logistics, but logistics about multiple things. I think the previous panel was also mentioning about mini trucks, stuff around that, on-demand services. I think Agesh can throw more light on the on-demand services aspect. So yeah, so a lot of stuff happening around logistics and probably solving the last mile issue, which is definitely a developing economy problem and a use case.
So the other area where there is quite a bit of interesting work happening is hyperlocal. So food delivery is one area that gets talked about. There are also companies helping find plumbers and electricians, etc. Via apps. So apps is where a lot of focus is right now with a lot of tech startups. What we are doing at Urban Pro is also hyperlocal, but in categories where the service professional, selecting a service professional requires looking at a few profiles and then making a decision like tutors, wedding professionals, etc. So hyperlocal is one area which is interesting and it's coming up recently. Yeah, I think that's all I had to share for now.
Great.
So I'm in part of an industry which I think has been around for very long. So it's not new. It's to deal with managing money for people. And I think it will remain long after many other industries come and go and fads come and go. But I think that the big change that I have seen happening is that maybe a decade ago when we started our business, close to 14 years ago, but a decade ago there wasn't too much money that people had. There's a lot more money there today. There was total sort of, India was very insulated. You needed to only worry about what happened in India and manage your money. That's changed dramatically now. What happens in Greece, what happened in Japan or Bulgaria will have an impact on India. That's true. The third thing is obviously there's a greater awareness now about managing money. And now people want different ways of dealing with it. So you do have online players saying we'll do financial plans for you online. We have players who want to do stuff only on telephone and Skype and not meet you face to face. And just because we started 13 years ago, We didn't think of robo-advisor at that point in time, but we are seriously thinking what else should we do, to add or enhance the service offering to individuals. So I think a lot of stuff happening there, and I think the good thing for me was that I moved from Mumbai to Bangalore close to 20 years ago, and maybe the entrepreneurial mindset sort of kicked in over here. So I think Bangalore is certainly helping from that point of view, also helping in terms of trying out new things because of a large immigrant population coming in. Of course, there are a whole bunch of entrepreneurs who are selling their businesses and saying, oh, I got money, so I should go back and put it in angel investing. And when we meet them, we try and tell them that, your personal goals are a little different from your business goals, and you should look at that. So there's a lot of opportunities there.
Great. So we learned about a diverse range of businesses that are being created in Bangalore across a range of sectors and solving new kinds of problems. I want to change gears a little bit and talk about India's relevance in the world. I was reading some data a few weeks ago, and Germany exports $1.5 trillion worth of goods and services. That's almost India's entire GDP. And Germany is a country of 80 million people. India has 1.2. And I keep wondering, why is India not so relevant in the global marketplace? We have world-class entrepreneurs like yourselves, a good ecosystem. What is it that we need to do to become a bigger part of the global economy? The number one search engine in the world, Google, is also the number one search engine in India. Facebook is number one in the world and in India. So when is it that we will, in this country, start creating world-class enterprises? And do you think that of the products and services that you guys are working on, which of these have global relevance? Whoever wants to take that on.
So I'll try and go there first. And I think what we are seeing is that as a country, India is becoming very global. I'll try and explain that in the sense that you find a lot of families having people one foot in India, one foot somewhere else. Some part of the family is in the US, some part is in Singapore, somebody then gets married to an Australian, and so on and so forth. And I think in the space of money, there's a big lack of awareness about what you need to do with that situation. You need to be aware of not only the investment opportunities, but you also need to be aware of taxation and reporting and so on and so forth. And we realized this a few years ago and said, oh, we'll be everywhere. We'll try and learn the products that are available in the US or what's new activity in Singapore. And what we've seen in the recent past is, especially probably post 2008, is that the regulator in each of these countries has got very local. So they want to control the type of advice being provided. And they tell you, oh, you want to provide advice to somebody in Singapore, you need to be registered here, and the only person who can be registered is a permanent resident. If you have more than 15 clients in the US, you need to be registered there, and so on and so forth. So we realized that a couple of years ago and said, oh, there's no point trying to be everywhere. So the whole game there is to try and create a network of professionals and experts from each of these countries whom we are associated with. In many cases, not commercially. It's just that if I needed advice on, for somebody who is in the US, then I have 2 or 3 different advisors who operate over there who can provide me that input. And I'll throw that question to all 3 of them and say, okay, what type of answers am I getting? And sort of distill that and give it to my client. And I think that's the big opportunity I see in this space of personal finance globally. Everyone's probably aware about FATCA, and India finally signed that agreement. And I think if you go and study FATCA, you realize that the intent is that FATCA is applicable in all countries, because only then it will work. So India will also want to know where are its Indian sort of citizens investing elsewhere and what sort of reporting they're doing. So I see big opportunities there in that space, and I don't know how this can be made online or sold or get invested in, but I think there's big opportunity there.
Tarun, you want to go next?
Yeah. So I think that's a slightly larger issue. 2 problems. Like slightly historical, our approach towards what sort of businesses we build here in India. So first is we've never ever in our history ever really focused a lot on innovation or hard sciences or really technology development. B, we don't have a product-based culture. Now, what happens in that scenario? So example point 1 is we don't have an Apple in India, right? But example of point 2 is we don't even have a Xiaomi in India, right? So obviously we're not innovating, we're not creating completely innovative new categories, new products here locally. But that would have been okay had we been doing what a lot of companies in China are doing and creating an alternative to Facebook, alternative to Google, alternative to Apple, right? But to do that also, you need to at least have a product culture. You need to be focused on, building a product rather than, just being a good delivery business or a good, very efficient manufacturer. Now, that's the thing. Most businesses that we've historically have had here, they've been started by communities which really have been into trading. So that's what our focus has been. Okay. So if you have to sell vehicles, for example, because obviously those are the sort of examples I'll give. If you have to sell vehicles here, how do we get this technology? How do we get this product? And how do we figure out how to manufacture this? Get all of this from Bosch, from Maruti, from from Honda, and some ex-supplier in the US, and then we put together a product here. Unfortunately, in that process, most of the value does not remain here. Most of the value goes out, to the Bosch, to the Honda, and to the other supplier in the US. And long term, as that industry really, really takes off, we realize that we can't innovate now, and we can't actually compete, and we're left behind. We missed a wave, and then we missed another wave, and then we keep missing waves because we're never really trying to be at the forefront of any wave. So fundamentally, what we need is sort of a focus on product and creating value at the onset. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to lead any curve. And so look at Apple. Yes, Apple does not manufacture anything in US, but like 50% of the value of the product remains with Apple. Like I think 12% of it goes to China, which does the manufacturing. Like the entire product gets manufactured in China, and like those guys barely get 12% of the value of an Apple product. So really, the entire focus on make in India, I think we should probably be at this point focused on designed in India, conceptualized in India. You start from there, and then like give it maybe a decade. You realize that then is how you will capture most of the value. Most of the really, really valuable big companies will certainly start coming out from India. That's not really happening at this point. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
I think would really agree on that viewpoint. In fact, adding on to Tarun's viewpoint, that's pretty bang on. And I think just adding on to that point, Indian ecosystem probably is promoting transactional businesses. So typically, if you look at the entrepreneurs also, stuff we're doing, it's more focused towards transactional businesses. I mean, anything like from book my shows to XYZs of the world. So transactions being at the core focus of anything and most of the things we do. For a mindset to come in to create a Facebook or a WhatsApp, so that I think was not transactional in nature. So the thought didn't incept from just being transactional. So that's one thing, one point. Traditionally, the 90s and the early 2000s was more like a entrepreneurial revolution coming more from a services side. Still continues to be, right? But the Infosys of India and the Wipros of the India and all that and entrepreneurial activity which actually happened there was more like from a service perspective. Again, transactional, in a sense. Having said that, I think I'm really hopeful because the current wave, so there are few, gems out there. If you can just, just widen the horizon, which is, as Tarun just mentioned, the focus is coming back to product. And we have some world-class product companies now starting to getting created from the country. I think what is also important for this to happen is the entire ecosystem. Like Mukul, you mentioned about the Germanys of the world. So what they are riding on is probably a 200-year-old or a 100-year-old patents, the innovations which they did probably 100 years back, 200 years back, and shells of the world are riding just on that. So they probably, even if they don't innovate now, they still have so much IP riding behind them. Right? They can still make millions and billions of dollars. So for India also to be there, it has to start from somewhere. And like Tarun rightly mentioned, we need to have some wave, we need to ride some wave, innovate at the base level, and then probably we can also be there. Coming back to Bangalore and the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think companies like Freshdesk, companies WebEngage and many more, okay? Even Zomato being there with a global outlook. So these are the companies which we are now beginning to see are actually there competing with the SAPs of the world, right? And that's, I think, the approach which will really get us there. And this is the approach probably is really required. And what we also need is poster boys. Once we have some success stories coming in, I think it will actually have that wave getting started, wherein we have more and more entrepreneurs actually coming and start believing that, you know what, I just need not create something to just make sense for India, but probably to make sense for the entire world. And that's when you really start thinking about the product. Right?
I'd just like to add one more point to that. So, exactly the example that you gave and then you built on Germany. So that's what happens when you don't ride a wave, right? You can't compete. India as a market cannot compete in building internal combustion engines. Like, yes, it can sell and you will create interesting companies of $5 billion, $10 billion, but you can't create a $100 billion, $200 billion Toyota now. Because those guys have, experts who have become really, really, really good at it for the last 50 years. So now if somebody were to start a company here and said, oh, okay, let me become a company which makes great petrol cars, it's going to be freakishly hard. And you'll probably take like another 100 years to get there, and by the time the wave's done. So you really need to start at the start. If you start here at this point, like when the entire industry is just starting off, and you're focused on the product, focused on technology development, then those experts will become, something that you own. People who are really good at, let's say, valve design or, piston design, you will have those people that come up in your company, and then you get scale. A service company has enormous issues with scaling, right? But a product company, Facebook is now, certainly went from in the last 8 years, 9 years, it's now a $250 billion company. It's bigger than GE now. So that's the power of scale. That's the power of focusing on the product and technology at the right time.
All right, thank you. Let me just become a panelist for a moment and put my economist hat on. I agree with everything that all of you have said. I'm even more hopeful now about India's future after listening to you guys. And India, I don't doubt, will produce world-class product companies in the next 10 to 15 years. It will happen. But I just want to add one more point. I don't think we should be shy about our competitive advantage in services. While Lenovo or Foxconn, etc., are not people's role models, they have created millions of jobs in China. And India not only needs to make the next Facebook, India needs to create jobs. And while Infosys, Wipro, and so forth have created a couple of million jobs with their ecosystems, there is medical tourism, which is a huge industry. There's just tourism. India gets 7 million people a year in foreign arrivals. Thailand gets 40 million, and it's a tenth of the size. And these are the real job-creating industries. From a pure economic perspective, what you guys are doing will have a great knock-off effect on the rest of the economy. But India cannot forget what it could be good at in the future. So I just wanted to say that and move on to the next topic. What are the challenges that you guys face as entrepreneurs, whether it's being in Bangalore or being in India? What holds you back, if anything? Rakesh, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think my answer is also kind of touches upon the previous question. So I think the ecosystem is maturing, and also as we see more success stories, the ecosystem will continue to mature. The last few years was more about what idea has worked in US or China, and who is building it here. Let's go back it. I think India needs to start thinking problems which are not solved elsewhere and start solving them. The services example, for example, so today there's a big wave of mobile. Now everyone who can write code, who can do mobile programming, is setting up a shop to do offshore mobile development, right? And it's a wave that these companies are riding. At some point this wave will disappear, but not enough people are thinking, how do I take the pain away from developing for this number of platforms which are building up, Apple, Android, Windows, and make it easier for companies to save money for companies. So that's where the technology is, which not enough work being done on that front. In terms of hurdles, I believe it's these other economies, other ecosystems have seen that history of success, and they now have that culture of betting on big ideas, which could be 0 or 1. They may completely fail. The most of the bets that I have seen being placed in India, there are exceptions of course, have been, hey, it's working in US. Now, now companies get started here with the same idea and they get funded. Yeah, so that's pretty much it.
Anyone else? What are the challenges of being an Indian entrepreneur?
So, I think the list is endless there. So, I think the latest TV series out there, the TVF Pictures, I think that pretty much summarizes, I don't know how many of you guys have actually seen that. So pretty much summarizes most of the, the challenges out there. I think apart from the challenges which actually comes from the regulations perspective and the government perspective, I think I'll just leave that part out. I'll just focus more on the cultural and the social aspects. And there are huge challenges. I think I can speak from my own experience. Had an opportunity of having 2 startups. One is recent. The first one started way back in 2006. And I think that would be a pretty bang on to tell you probably the sea change which actually happened from the 2005-6 times and probably now times. So when we started back in 2006, the problem even before we started, that convincing your parents. The startup was an unknown word and probably, parents are, not at all comfortable. They send you to these great colleges and they expect you to do jobs in MNC. So I think it starts from there. I think these are some of the things which nobody talks about, especially in the US and developed countries because they don't face these challenges. But I think for an Indian entrepreneur, apart from taking on challenges of infrastructure, government regulations and so on and so forth, capital, getting some money on board. I think the challenges, even bigger challenges starts even probably first take that plunge to have that ecosystem which supports you to take that plunge. Risk-taking ability is not inherently there. And if you add on these aspects, it becomes even worse. Then second aspect comes that you have taken that plunge, but now you need to have some 10 employees at least joining you. How do you convince them? And you need not just convince them, you have to convince their parents, their friends, and the whole ecosystem. So that's there. I think, but what is also changing from my own experience in the last 5, 6, 8 years is, again, the poster boys. So I think the Flipkarts of the world and all these successful startups of the world has really tilted the balance. Now people are much more comfortable taking this plunge. It's easier to convince. It's now a mainstream term. So things are changing out there. But yeah.
Okay, that's encouraging.
So I personally think that as entrepreneurs, if there were no hurdles, there wouldn't be opportunities. And I don't see challenges the way people see them as roadblocks. They are things that you have to overcome, you have to get over and move on. And if you didn't believe that there was opportunity, you wouldn't be in, where you are today. So I really don't know whether there needs to be too much focus on what is the hurdle. If there was no hurdle, then it would be very easy and everybody would be doing it and you wouldn't be one of the few people doing it. So I think it's our sort of mindset that needs to change and say that, okay, there is some hurdle or there's a traffic rule which is one way outside this hotel. I don't want to actually go left, I want to go right. But yeah, you follow the rule because that's the rule. And then you work around that. So I see that, so the ability to go one step forward and think through, say, 3 years from today or 5 years from today and say, this is what success will look to me like 5 years from now, it automatically removes the sort of immediate hurdle that's there. So that's what I think.
That's a great mindset. And I think we also heard that the challenges of India are not only policy related, they are cultural. And I think you suggested that these challenges are becoming a little bit easier. So that's encouraging to hear. So let me ask the final question, and then we'll move on to the audience. Why are you all in Bangalore? What brought you to this city?
I think the ecosystem, right? Okay. It's like building on the previous question, there needs to be an ecosystem. So if I just go out there and say that, hey, I have a startup, why don't you guys join? I'll have much more people getting interested in my idea and probably even wanting to hear, about my stuff and probably even considering joining me more in Bangalore than probably any other city. That's a big plus point. Second is not just that, probably conferences like these, having like-minded people at multiple levels. So at one level, you have, people who have already been successful and now wishing to give back to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, not just in terms of their time as mentors, but probably even, their money as angel investors, so on and so forth. That's a big, that's a big part of the ecosystem. Second part of the ecosystem is obviously the mindset and probably the risk-taking ability. The third aspect is the whole ecosystem, as I say. So creating a product these days is not just about creating everything in-house, but also more about curation. Once you have a core product understood, you also have a lot of products to supplement you. And I think Bangalore is a perfect example. Not just Bangalore, I think Mumbai and NCR are also coming out there. Perfect examples of these ecosystems being there. Like one of the friends was just doing a food tech startup. So he just said that, you know what, I just take care of my food. There is an entire other startup which takes care of my logistics. Great stuff to have. And that's exactly what has been happening, and probably Silicon Valley is much more evolved in that respect. But I think if you look at India, yes, Bangalore is probably ahead of the curve there. And I can safely say that probably I can see Bangalore coming in probably the top 3 startup destinations in the entire world very soon. Yeah.
Tarun, you have a thought?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So the reason we also shifted was because, the specific case, when we were fundraising, we based out of Chennai. It was a great place to be in to start up because we are, very close to IIT Madras at that point and helped us do a lot of tech stuff. But beyond a certain point, we had a lot of issues with how people think. So a lot of feedback that we kept on getting, not everybody, but a lot of feedback that we generally got in that city was, okay, you don't start like something this ambitious. You probably like do this circuit first, you supply this to, another OEM, and then you move there, you build a profitable business, then you go to a step above. And at that time, this is 1 year back, I'd keep coming to Bangalore every alternate weekend, just to clean my mind. And every person that I met here were like, oh, this is brilliant, you should not change your pitch. So there was a very, very clear difference. People here were thinking more like the way people in Silicon Valley thought. Oh yeah, that's great, So your problems are now only money, people, team, right? The opportunity is brilliant, you should definitely chase it. We got a complete different feedback everywhere else. Hey, your problems are money, people, and team. Like you're not going to cross all of them, The opportunity is there, but there are like million opportunities. So the mindset difference is very critical. And obviously hiring becomes far more easier in a place like here when you've got like so many startups, so many people coming in here. You're probably picking up somebody who's already living in Koramangala rather than, convincing somebody who lives in Koramangala to come settle down in Chennai. That's like such a hard pitch. So,
sorry, let me just move on. Rakesh, quickly.
Yeah, I think tech hiring is a big reason, and also the weather.
So I came for very different reasons, but if I think back today, I think Bangalore is the place where there's an immigrant population. People are outside their comfort zone. So if you're depending on a team, then this is a great place to be in because you'll recruit people with that sort of mindset.
I came here for the traffic. So no, this is all encouraging that we are in a dynamic place with nice weather. With that, we'll end. I want to thank you, my panelists, and thank you all.